Are you going to record it?
Yep.
Alert from
Oh, geez.
disk not ejected.
Okay.
Good evening, all of our wonderful Grangers, for this terrific Lenten night and retreat by Kathleen. I also would like to welcome all of Kathleen's members of her institute here tonight. It's wonderful having you all here. And we also would like to suggest to you, if you would like to join the Grange community every Sunday at this same link, we have our own liturgy at 10:30 every Sunday morning, and we would love to have any of you would like to join us. This coming Sunday, in 2 days actually, we are privileged to have Danny Merton, who is a superb homilist and poet, and he'll be giving us a homily this coming Sunday. At this moment, I would just like to give all of our deep gratitude to Sister Kathleen for doing this tonight. We so appreciate it, Sister. And Kathleen, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's very consoling to be together here now mid-Lent, as we are really getting a feeling, perhaps midway through, what we had originally hoped and wished our Lent.
Kathleen, I'm sorry, you'll need to unmute.
Thank you. To be together for this privileged time of spiritual renewal, which has always been such an anticipated season for those of us who are the Grangers in diaspora. We spent many a decade being in solidarity with each other as we tried to make this Lenten journey from the self that perhaps has grown weary in the spiritual life to a vibrant, renewed spiritual person. And that's what, in a sense, this evening for a reflection on renewing Lent is all about. I think you know that the Benedictine Grange really has its most ardent spiritual ally in the person of Thomas Merton. The Grange, in so many ways, was born out of the charism of the monastic spirit that Merton embodied so powerfully for the modern world. And our beloved John, our priest, brother, founder of this community, was very, of course, taken by Thomas Merton, and his writings and his spirit underlies so much of what we do and how we understand our Christian lives. So I thought this evening we could let Merton again, as he was in Advent, he could be our guide through Lent to aid us as we begin our way once again toward the Easter mysteries. One of the things that we're invited to engage this Lent, every Lent, is a new familiarity with the desert. None of us live in a desert, except perhaps maybe one or two people who have left the Grange community in Connecticut and found their way to desert locales. But most of us are suburban urbanites. Our deserts are different. And yet this theme is the most palpable, really, in our Lenten spirituality. we follow Jesus into the desert because it's there he goes to wrestle with himself, his demons, to encounter the Spirit, to put on the courage, the grace, and the grit that he's going to need to do the work of moving toward Jerusalem, which is what we're all symbolically and mythically doing these weeks and months. But we're also invited to somehow have a sense that the desert is the terrain that will lead us home, that will lead us to the place that we are meant to be within our own spiritual environment and in this shared communal space for stripping off the inauthentic, allowing to arise, to bloom what is most authentic in us for the life of the world. Now I'm going to try to let our music take us there as well. Let's see if this will work. So let's make our way home together. And Beth, would you tell me if this music is all right? If it's coming through okay?
So I think it's okay.
Good. So through the desert, there is a path, which is an open sacred highway to our homeland. And it's a track that means to bring us home to a hospice. A hospice that will aid us in healing what needs to be healed still, no matter how many Lenten journeys we've made. We are all in need of the great healing that is for our own wholeness. I invite you to listen to that song as you may find it on your musical servers, so that the songs that have surrounded us for decades at the Grange in our practice can really live and resonate and echo in us. So, the real question that we're asking at this stage in our practice and process is, how fertile is your own desert this Lent? How have we been able to cultivate a desert that is nurturing and fruitful? I hope I'm going to be able to balance the 56 modalities of technology that I have in play to do this tonight. So, first question that we want to entertain together is, where is your desert? How have you composed a desert for yourself this Lent? how has it become for you the terrain that opens up to paradise? Because that's the paradox of this Lenten journey. We begin in an earthly desert, a desert of our human experience, our existential life. And then as we make our way with open mind and open heart through all that that desert calls us to, by way of purification, by way of celebration, we can see on the horizon the paradise that we desire. So it may seem strange for us to make for paradise by way of a desert, but that's the archetypal and the mythic root of our biblical tradition. The itinerary of the biblical tradition always has us moving, always leaving one place of comfort to move through, in a sense, a disorienting environment so that we can really be reoriented anew. The highway that leads us from this wasteland world at times is so bereft of peace and joy and wonder as we cut through the desert. It's a terrain that's unfamiliar to most of us. And so we're in need of orienteers, we're in need of guides, we're in need of knowing journey folk who might aid us in the passage we're bound to make as we make our way home. So for this brief while, of course, let's invite the wisdom of two very helpful guides, our brother Thomas Merton and the great American poet, Mary Oliver. And Eddie, would you be the voice of Merton for us, first of all? If you would unmute.
My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing it. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I am doing. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death? I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Thank you. That's so beautifully read. One of the things I think we must begin with, as our brother tells us, is desire. Christian life is predicated on desire. The great spiritual masters say that if we are to make the transformation from the old human nature, so conditioned by the ways of a spiritually unawakened world, to this great, vibrant Christ life, it must be energized by the passion and the power of desire. Merton had that desire, and Merton was looking for home. Also, Merton was desiring something that he had intuited as a young man, as a child probably, that there was, in a sense, living within the ordinary, mundane, quotidian nature of our world and our lives, a depth and a richness that was unfathomable but accessible through intuition, through contemplation, and through love. Merton sought out that home space for himself, orphan soul that he was, in, as we know, the Trappist monastery of Our Lady of Gethsemane in Kentucky. He says that he went there as a young man at 26 in revolt against the meaningless confusion of a life in which there was so much activity, so much movement, so much useless talk, so much superficial and needless stimulation that he couldn't remember who he was. I always find that particular passage from Merton so utterly contemporary. I mean, couldn't each of us say something like that? That our lives, in a sense, are in a vise or in a maze of such kind of disorientation, such that it's so easy to fall off our path. But for the next half of his life, he went in at 26, he died 26 years later. He learned a new way of being. He learned a different kind of wisdom, supported by rhythmic practice of daily prayer that aided a process of recovery for him, because he was a very, very wounded soul. And that's why he's so helpful to us. And of discovery of a new self, of a beautiful self, of a simple self, a true self in his own language, that was drawn up like a jewel, he says, from seas of confusion, restlessness, and banality. Because, you know, Merton was plagued with the same questions and afflictions that torment the people of our moment. He lived deeply into this different kind of wisdom, of a kind of healing and illuminating and transformative Christian life. And his passion, as we know, was to share that wisdom with all of us beyond the monastic enclosure. It just seems so perfect for us as the community of the Benedictine Grange. And I smile to think of how he would completely love to know of our existence. And I'm smiling also to think of our brother John now being companion to him and with him in fostering and nurturing our lives as, in a sense, lay monastics, worldly mystics. Merton didn't find answers to all of those questions that we heard Eddie voice so beautifully, but he figured out a way to plumb those great concerns more radically and to engage, as we are doing now, spiritual guides that could lead him toward that threshold of homecoming, which would be for Thomas, the threshold of paradise. And he understood himself to be a servant for us, someone who would probe the lonely deserts of the human heart that for many of us, we just either don't have the inclination or the discipline or the support or the courage or the capacity to plumb the desert depths of the human heart, of our human nature, and to be able to, in some sense, breathe forth healing onto those depths through wisdom. And that's what I think Merton does. He calls himself an explorer in the realms of the human heart that few of us dare to probe. So I want to say that anyone on a spiritual journey must begin, no matter who they are or where they're from or what their tradition is, they must begin in some modality of a desert. But it is an elected desert. It is, one could say, a composed desert. And now I want to contradict myself and say, if you're really, really lucky, you can compose your own desert. If you are like the majority of the people on the planet and ourselves most of the time, our deserts open up before us. Our deserts grow up around us. Those sandstorms come toward us, and we are brought into the deserts that are going to be our healing spaces. But let's just say that for Lent, we intentionally compose a desert that is composed of our chosen mode of solitude, even if we live in a family of 6. In the Lenten spirit, we say this is a time when we research a margin of desert ecology, environment for us to inhabit. It's a time of intentional fasting from whatever hurts us. It's a time where we cultivate another kind of mindful silence, where we're not simply just in the noisy old regular world that sometimes is what our daily lives are. It's a time of deeper prayer and a time of generous almsgiving. Merton describes it like this: bring me with joy, O God, across thy Jordan. I am sorry I forget my desires and burn with others' desires. But there is only one desire really, to find the promised land and the freedom of a pure love that is without concern for anything else but love. That is without concern for anything but the purity, the simplicity of God, for God's will and God's glory. So let me be brought to a peace in the living reality of a love that is contemplation and act, that clings to God and embraces all the world in God's peace, in God's unity. So that's the great desire. So in such wilderness of soul, Thomas Merton discovered not only the self he had lost in the maze of the modern world, but its deeper source. It's the deeper source of this living self in the depths of divine mercy and mystery. We know that Thomas Merton's favorite word is mercy within mercy within mercy. And in this chastening environment,
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Sorry, that's my Irish assistant. And in this chastening world, he found himself, and he found himself well and whole and sane. So for a moment, this evening, my friends, we said we'd have a pen and a paper nearby. If it moves you to reach for them, good. Let's just do a little bit of reflection on how we have cultivated a desert for ourselves, a healing desert for ourselves this Lent. If we did not work through perhaps that intention or process, were we drawn into a desert that abiding in it faithfully has turned out to be a field of blessing for us? So let's just ask the question, how have I in some way cultivated a desert for myself? How have I found a place where I can begin to work on myself through the mathematics of subtraction? Because as Meister Eckhart tells us, the soul grows through subtraction, relinquishment, letting go. I don't need this. I don't not need that. I don't want this. I don't want that. I want one thing only. So let's ask ourselves these questions. How does your desert this Lent shelter you? How does it nurture and protect you as you desire to do your deep work? And also, how does your desert grow? Let's take a moment to wonder.
We make our way to the holy place, full of desire to receive your grace. O hidden one, O glorious, show us the beauty of your face. Grant us our heart's desire, be its flame, be its fire. Grant us our heart's desire. We make our way to the holy place, full of desire to receive your grace. O hidden one, O glorious, show us the beauty of your face. Heal our brokenness, in your wholeness gather us. Heal all our brokenness. We make our way to the holy place, full of desire to receive your grace. O hidden one, O glorious, show us the beauty of your face. Forgive our forgetfulness of your precious tenderness. Forgive our forgetfulness. Show us the way to peace. Be the way, be the path. Show us the way to peace.
May we each and all be graced to have such a desert to shelter us and to hold us in this work that we do now, this Lent. it sounds funny, I think. It must sound funny. It sounds funny to me, and I'm saying it, that the deserts that we are invited to discover and to recover are really the deserts of paradise. We all know that the desert is fertile. We all know that one El Nino coming up through Mexico is going to set the deserts ablaze with life, because they are holding the seeds of such enormous vitality and variety and beauty. This practice of cultivating our deserts is so important for this moment, isn't it, my friends? Because we know that we are living on a desertified planet now. Our earth has become desertified. And unless we become cultivators of the vitality and fertility of the desert, our planet will continue to suffer. It's dying. So Merton then taught so many fundamental and wonderful means, directions to find the way home. And he says, and it's making me very scared that my computer keeps going on and off. He taught us routes toward this fundamental wholeness, which was ourselves, discovered in the awakening of the contemplative mind. Now, one of the most wonderful gifts of the Spirit that we have received through the Benedictine Grange community, and this is what I wish to talk about in our second phase of the retreat, the charism of the Grange that we carry, is that we were nurtured and fostered for decades within a contemplative community. That's why we loved it. We crossed the threshold into that barn, and we were in a contemplative world. And in that space and place, it was safe for our contemplative mind to awaken. Once, as Merton was so disoriented in the desiccating, the drying out anguish and confusion of the worlds and his own making, Merton made a desert of his life, but it was more like the Romans. They made a desert of the world and called it peace. No, not that kind of desert. He came to know the peace of someone who had found a way home to God, to the world, and especially to himself, because we can never be at peace unless we are feeling so at home and so welcomed in and by ourselves, unless we delight to abide in and with ourselves. Why would we invite anybody else to abide with us if we couldn't do that? He told us, he says in one of his prayers, I travel to you, Lord, I will travel to you through 1,000 blind alleys. You want to bring me to you through stone walls. That is such a wonderful koan from Merton. And maybe it moves something in you, in me. Have I had any stone walls that I had so beautifully constructed and erected around myself, around something that I thought I owned, around some kind of identity, some kind of relationship, some kind of power, pleasure, or possession, since those are the three traps for us as humans. Is there a stone wall that in my desert work I'm invited to deconstruct. We're wanting to take down the walls in the desert of our land, to let good souls cross, to let those who need to flee the deserts, the blood-soaked deserts, the wounding deserts, to a healing desert. So why would we not do that for ourselves? For Merton, his chosen desert felt for him like the near horizon of paradise. And as John always told us, he loved to tell us that that word meant to be alongside of the gods. Merton opened himself to the living God, encompassing him on every side in the glories of nature, which we do and which many of us, many of you are blessed to have in your neighborhood. He did it, we do it with countless dialogue partners, whether they are our intimates, our spouses, our children, or our ministry partners, or our friends and siblings, or the stranger whom we are befriending. This healing happened to him in the pathos of society that he allowed himself to touch, that I know that we Grangers allow ourselves to touch. We let the suffering of the planet find an embrace in us, and in ways that we cannot imagine. That is a healing power. And we also find our way to the living God. We open ourselves, make ourselves porous, receptive to the living God through our ceaseless prayer. And I hope that in some of the things we'll say tonight, that it really resonates with the other teachings that we in the Grange community and beyond received this season from Sister Mary Margaret Funk, who gave us an opening to the desert tradition, but also to Father James Martin, who really took us into an enormous, how shall I say, menu of prayer modalities by which we could cultivate this one thing that we are meant to do: pray always, pray always. Doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter if you do it with your breath, with every breath, as an intention in the morning, living one with every breath I praise you this day. Or if you're like Gandhi and you just keep repeating Rama, 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 the name of God, along with our Sufi friends and our Muslim friends and their 99 names, along with our Jewish friends who just can't stop creating psalms with their minds and hearts, along with our Buddhist friends and their gathas or their breath prayers. We are meant to pray always. In time, Merton's life, like ours, became inexhaustible adoration. I think that's one of the charisms, I should say the features of the charism of the Grange, in which we have been formed and fostered. We're praising people. And it means everything to us to continue the work, the great work. This is what the office is, the divine office, right? The divine work of constant praise is endless expressions of praise that sound in our solitude, in our silence, in our sociability. For Merton, he sent it all out over the woodlands of Appalachia. Well, I want to turn to Mary Oliver, who, by the way, I think is a desert mother in her own right. I think she's a modern desert mother. And she intimates something like this tending toward paradise. This is what she thinks it feels like. Still, what I want in my life is to be willing to be dazzled, to cast aside the weight of facts and maybe float a little while above this difficult world. I want to believe I am looking into the white fire of a great mystery. I think we could hold that one phrase for the entire evening tonight. To be looking into the white fire of a great mystery. I want to believe that the imperfections are nothing, that the light is everything, that there is more than the sum of each flawed blossom rising and fading. And I do. I think if anybody that we know who has made herself known exclusively by the manifestation of her paradise mind, it is Mary Oliver. She lives there. She lives there with everything. She could pick up an old potato peel out of her strainer and she could find a world of grace, not even hiding, but on full display. That's what a Lent is for. It's to immerse ourselves in the kind of practice and process that thins out all the thickness of our unreceptive mind. So really, it's not too late to ask the question, how do we compose such a purifying desert for the remaining weeks of this Lent? I need to be with you in this conversation so that I will be doing what Merton is asking or inviting us to do. We support each other. To cultivate a desert that I know holds the seeds of paradise within it, waiting to bloom, whether that is in my memory, how I'm cultivating my memories. It's really, really important that we remember gracefully and not afflictively. I often wonder, what are we supposed to do with all those photographs we all take? Where do we put them? Where do they go? What do we do with them? Somehow there are such memories that I have curated in myself. Some of them I hold there and they hurt me when I go to turn them over. They're barbed. I have not yet learned how to have mercy on that memory so that it will no longer afflict me. But it's part of my desert work. Part of the desert work of turning over my life's commitments, the bounties of my life, the poverty of my life, my own creativity and commitment. So Merton's going to say, and we can say it with him, teach me to go to this country beyond words and beyond names. And then he says, but teach me also to pray on this side of the frontier where these woods are. I need to be led by you. I need my heart to be moved by you. I need my soul to be made clean by your prayer. The Pauline instruction and revelation. I'm not praying. It is the Spirit that is praying within me. I need my soul to be made clean by your prayer. I need to be made strong by you. I need the world to be saved and changed by you. I need you for all those who suffer, who are in prison, who are in danger, in sorrow. I need you for all the crazy people. I need your healing hand to work always in my life. I need you to make me, as you made your son, a healer, a comforter, a savior. I need you to name the dead. I need you to help me, to help the dying cross their particular rivers. I need you for myself, whether I live or die. It is necessary. Amen. So I thought we could just take a moment again, a few moments to write. So helpful. It was Merton's practice. And finish that prayer in my own voice. I need you too. I need you too. I need you too. What? How would we compose a few lines of a prayer like that? What is it I need? What am I composting in my desert? What am I letting somehow die there? What do I need to leave there and not take forward toward the horizon of paradise? Lent is a letting go time. It's a subtraction time. Or maybe, maybe life has composted a desert for me. But let's just finish that question. What do I need you to do? I need you to. Maybe we'll share that at the end of our evening for anyone who wishes. Let's take the time. So, Merton teaches us that our deserts are composed of commitments and desire. Several different commitments, but one and only one fierce desire. I want to say that the commitments are the life-giving practices that each of us takes up in order to cultivate a wholesome spiritual self. Homo pneumaticus, as we say in the scripture, as Paul said, spiritual person, spiritual vitality of our nature. And I want to say that this desert spirituality, as Sister Meg taught us so powerfully in our session with her, this is the ground of all Christian mysticism, Christian contemplative life and practice. All spirituality arises in the desert, the literal desert, the desert of the Middle East, the desert of our Christian ancestors. And we know they came in their thousands into the desert of the ancient Near East to find somebody that was sane in a crazy, collapsing empire. Somebody that had wisdom, someone who could give instruction for how to live a truly human life. So in imitation of Jesus and his desert transformation, they set out to what they call lay hold upon their souls with this one fierce desire and prayer. We beg you, make us truly alive. I think that's the most wonderful prayer that lives within our tradition. It's so unadorned, and it's what we all crave. We all crave to have the sensation, the feeling of that profound vitality, that rich vitality. If I may bow to our brother John again, I think this is part of the reason why everybody loved him so much and wanted to be near him and wanted to be in his circle, his world, because John knew how to activate that great aliveness. It coursed through him, and he was like alive, literally a live wire to transmit it to us. And so in these desert, workout centers, dojos, our ancestors gave birth to the forms of Christian practice that we still live today. But, this is where we have, I think, our closest and most agreeable conversation with Buddhism, because our Christian ancestors, our early relations, they went into the deserts for the same reason that the Buddhist monks went into the forest. They were looking for a way to end their suffering. They were looking for a way to end neurotic, unnecessary suffering and to live in a peaceful nature. And so they wanted to explore the roots and the causes of their own suffering and to become really deeply self-understanding. Christian spirituality actually begins with the human. Everything begins with the human, actually, in Christian spirituality, because it begins for us with the incarnation. the humanization or the human manifestation of the ineffable divine, the unknowable, unimaginable divine manifesting in our human mode. What our ancestors were looking for, where they were looking to be liberated from anxious, self-interested preservation, the way the world is always looking for it. And as we know, in another formula, do you remember, in an earlier formula of our Eucharistic practice, we would always say around the Our Father, deliver us from all destructive anxiety. Do you remember that? I love that phrase. I don't know where it's gone. I pray for it daily. Deliver me from destructive anxiety, from useless anxiety. Teach me the strategy and the skill to just not go there. That's what we're talking about in the desert. They sought to master the deadening addictions to pleasure, power, possession that were the dominant social impulses of their age and their empire, just as they are in our age, because those are the deadening impulses of the human nature. The impulse to pleasure, power, and possession in an unwholesome, out of balance way. They wanted to learn how to gather and focus their energies, their human energies, to intensify and concentrate their awareness, their consciousness, and thereby to convert themselves to liberty, to freedom, for love and for work. Mary Oliver puts it a little more simply. Look, I want to love this world as though it's the last chance I'm ever going to get to be alive and know it. Look, I want to love this world as though it's the last chance I'm ever going to get to be alive and know it. So, what was the program of the desert? What were our desert folk up to? And I will go through this rather simply, I hope, so that you may take these terms, if we have not shared them already, and turn them over in these last weeks of Lent. Several commitments, one fierce desire to experience the liberation of the desert and liberation in the desert. What the desert people sought, Merton tells us, was their own true self in Christ. It was their Christic nature. They wanted to go to the next stage. What does one do with one's converted life once you come into the Christian community? Find yourself swimming around in the rebirthing waters of baptism, once you find yourself being nurtured on the bread of life of the Eucharist. What's it for? And how do I cultivate it? But in order to awaken and give birth, we are our own, in a sense, midwives. We are midwifing the Christ nature within us. To do this, though, we have to really reject completely the false, the formal, the fabricated self that is developed and constructed and required by the social compulsions of the world. So when you're really being honest, when I'm really being silent, really solitary, when I get those moments, when I give myself those moments, the gift of COVID, we have all had these moments. We have all been dwelling in deserts, some of us, quite literally, for over a year. When we're really solitary, we don't have the necessity to put on for anyone or anything else. And then you really get to see who you are. I find myself talking to my cat, but of course I'm always talking to myself. And I hear myself speaking out of a voice at times that I say, that's not your noble self. That's not your Christic self, Kate. That's your annoyed, your aggravated, your fussy self. That's your angry self. That's your resentful self. That's your fearful self. But if we are not in the silence of solitude somehow, we don't get to hear ourselves, those voices that are going on in our heads, the pain body narration. We don't get to see the features of our, so to speak, naked face, our naked selves, the self we are without a personality, which is a construction, right? We don't take that with us. Necessary, useful, but hopefully really almost made of gossamer. Put it on, take it off. The poet writes, I must prepare a face to meet the other faces that I meet. What Merton wants to say is, how can I strip away? How can I strip away the most unnecessary features of the self that I am in my hiddenness, and in my manifestation? How can I be the simplest, stripped down thing? I once said to Karen Veronica, may she be with us tonight. I said, Karen, you look so beautiful lately. I said, you seem so well and so healthy lately. And she said to me, I'm caring more about how I feel and less about how I look. And when I say how I look, I don't mean, the cosmetic enterprise of showing up with having combed your hair or done any number of things that the desert people, by the way, never did. And Merton, neither, he didn't have to. But I am talking about the discovery of that face before we were born. So can we take another moment, my friends, and just do a little bit of contemplative work? And then I'm going to have to leave some of this perhaps till next time, but because I want us to talk to each other. Let's just take a moment to inquire, if you really could, if you had that kind of grace and guts, what would you take off from your personality, from the self that lives in the world, but isn't always the most transparent self that allows your true self to come forward? Can we just take a moment to wonder about that? What would you like to let go of to reveal more of your own beauty and truth? So, my friends, we have not come to the end of the offering I wished to give you tonight, but we can share, I think, more of it next time. Just briefly to share. This particular slide is reminding us that just like Jesus, when we go into that desert, we come face to face with our demons. I mean, that's the point, in a sense, of going into the desert, is to find them so that we can befriend them somehow. Demons that are made of, the greatest wounds, wounded memories. The demons that are that part of ourself that have been betrayed or been abandoned, been misunderstood. The demons that are that part of ourself that have been falsely admired and therefore become a stumbling block to us because of their pride. The demons that are our unrefined and unskillful energies of irritation that can become anger. So as we take some time now, and Beth, I think we don't really have time to go into rooms, but I think maybe we might have time to invite one another, if we wish, to just press the bar. Is that right, Beth, or shall we raise our hand?
No, if you'd like to have people just speak. We can unmute folks and they can take turns.
Good. Let's just see what's coming up in us. And maybe by way of a conclusion this evening, we could complete Merton's prayer. And let's be raw, let's be real. That prayer, I need you to. We'll do that at the end. But for now,
Also, what we could do is I'll open up the chat window if people want to type in something
good.
to answer that question.
Mhm. So what's bringing up in you? What is something of a gift that you've heard tonight from our desert friends, from Merton or Mary, that might aid us during the rest of our Lent? Someone is thinking about what he needs to strip away to become a simpler self. A simpler self is a more alive self, more awake. Thank you, Donald. What's moving in you? Put it in the chat room. Or what stays with you as something you want to hold on to. Somebody's talking about that habit they have of wanting to control, and how it's not aiding them in their full flourishing.
So, Kathleen,
Patricia.
I must admit that entering into yet another Lent in this great mystery on our planet with this virus, right? You know, I just being able to get through Lent and time without a vaccine, and you know, kind of the waiting for springtime was filling my prayer, and the gift tonight has been to really to have the invitation of kind of moving into the depths of these questions, and it's saving Lent for me. It's not just about the everyday of what we've been through for the last year now. It's you've been able to refocus this for me, and I'm just ever so grateful, because these questions and this these images will stay with me for many weeks, right? And beyond Lent, I'm sure.
Good, Patricia. Thank you. Thank Merton.
Yeah.
Someone,
But you've made it so accessible for us, Kathleen.
thank you, Patricia.
Yeah.
I labored to make it accessible to myself, right? That's what comes through. The deserts of Lent are full of grace, and they're full of a certain kind of, dormant seed, some kind of pollen that if we go into the desert, it's going to stick to us. That saving pollen. And Patricia, you're absolutely right. We were in an existential desert. We didn't need to construct a desert. We've been in silence and in solitude and in that kind of having to face the realities of our vulnerable existence as we've constructed it. But I feel myself that as I've tried to keep a desert open, move into it, I feel that it is laden with gifts. We're going to traffic through this desert we're going through. We'll come out in the great festival of the resurrection. We are going to be laden with pollen and seeds and everything that lives in potentia, as potentiality in the desert. One of our communities says that the desert also brings forth beauty that is unknown and that we may need to cultivate. Yes, very, very actually and existentially, we are going to have to find every desertified little patch of this earth and do guerrilla gardening on it. Do some sort of guerrilla gardening on it. Cultivating.
I didn't catch that.
Well,
Could you try again? Okay.
yes, okay. Bye-bye, Seamus. Yeah. Someone writes, I need you to shepherd me into the present moment again and again and again. Someone is taking away that our wounds are the divine gifts that help us to be truly one with others in an intimate way over time. Yeah, that's the marvel of suffering, right? It's the great conduit. It's the way solidarity is woven. Somebody wants to remember to make herself porous to God. Someone's praying to faith's death, fully engaging in some unique way. Someone wants to be more contemplative, more quiet, disengaged from the computer. Oh, that's one of the demons that lives in our desert, I think. Lives in my desert anyway. Not the poor, I don't want to badmouth AI, not the entity of the computer itself, but perhaps of my undisciplined and mindless way of trafficking in it. Someone wants to remember and is saying in his prayer, I need you to pull me through the walls of fear that I build around myself. Someone's praying for the gift of discernment in the cultivation of his remaining years. Yeah, what is worthy of my life? I always have to ask that question because as people who know me know, I have a habit of not having wholesome, healthy boundaries. I am too yes at times. And so discernment is so important. So we can, husband our resources to live the way we want to, joyously. Those of us who are elders, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Someone wants to prostrate her egoic unworthiness on the desert floor of surrender, renewal, and resilience, to embrace and to own her shadow rather than project her judgments onto others. So, of course, we know that's not her real self, but that's just part of herself. That's just part of her. That's one of those little demons that we were talking about here. Those energies within us that are just not disciplined, they're not integrated. They're off reservation. And they have a will of their own. They're willful. And they're not bent toward the will of the true self. It is exactly 8:30, my friends. Someone wants to be filled with wonder again and to have his eyes opened to see what is already there. Some of us are making our way out of or through existential deserts. And they have chastened us, these deserts and these seasons that we are going through. And so we do have this litany of need. And we just, by way of ending, we'll have an ending song, my friends, but by way of ending, I'd love to just fill out Merton's litany of I need you to. This is really in your face, direct prayer to the living God. I need you to, unadorned. And we could say it as we will. I'm going to say one, and then if somebody would jump in and say another. I just saw Barbara on this. Hello, Barbara. I need you to keep me well. I need you to keep me keeping me well.
I need you to show me what I need to compost.
I need you to give me courage for what is to come.
I need you to help me stay in the present moment.
One of our sisters says, I need you to give me the grace to abide in you always. I need you to keep me faithful and fruitful. One of our sisters says, I need you to show me the way to go home. We're hearing each other's prayers tonight, friends, aren't we? I mean, it's humbling, and it's so intimate, and it's so inviting of each of us to hold each other in this desert circle that we've composed tonight for the rest of our Lent. You know, we'd be praying for us each by names. We'd be having partners if it were Advent again, and we'd be praying somebody through Advent. But let's do that as this circle of blessing, that we really pray each other toward our deepest desire, that white flame of desire that will corduroys everything that needs to be healed in such a dramatic way. It will illuminate us. It will allow us to radiate that Christ grace in the world that so needs us. With your permission, my friends, we'll just end with, I think, a poem from Mary Oliver. And a song. And then we'll see each other in 2 weeks, I think. Isn't that right? For maybe a way to catch up with the ending of this reflection. But something I really, really want to do with the Grangers, which is to turn over the charism of the Grange that's been entrusted to us and to wonder more deeply how to embody it. Someone says, I need you to allow myself to be loved by you. Someone says, I need you to help me have faith to accept the mystery. So here's the real question of Lent. Mary Oliver poses it. Have you ever seen anything in your life more wonderful than the way the sun every evening, relaxed and easy, floats toward the horizon and into the clouds or into the hills or to the rumpled sea and is gone? And how it slides again out of the blackness every morning on the other side of the world, like a red flower streaming upwards on its heavenly oils. Say on a morning in early summer, at its perfect imperial distance. And have you ever felt for anything such wild love? Do you think there is anywhere in any language a world billowing enough for the pleasure that fills you? The sun, as it reaches out, as it warms you, as you stand there, empty-handed. She finishes that poem in a different way, but I'd like to leave it there for the evening and say just that we might stand in our own selves, our own lives, with our arms outstretched for the billowing grace that wants to awaken in us. So, since we've been playing around in the deserts of North Africa, I thought we could let the monks of Senegal take us out. And perhaps we could just wish each other peace for this night. Hold our hands up to each other. Lent is not for the faint of heart. To stay open for the marvelous gifts of healing that we so desire. May the prayer we make in our personal, corporate, communal deserts be nurturing the fertility of that ecology, spiritually, socially, mentally, politically, economically, environmentally, every way, every way. May we honor the desert. May we have the courage to abide in the ways that we will have to abide in the expanding deserts of our world. May we gather and rescue those who are fainting in our deserts. I need you to convince us that this is not our work, but it is your work being done in our willingness. I need you, we need you to make us willing this night and every night. Amen. So good night to everyone.